Final Fantasy Tactics isn't just a tactical RPG. It's a story about class struggle, corruption, and power that feels just as urgent today as it did in 1997 when it originally released. Hey everybody, I'm GameDad7 and welcome to my channel. Thank you so much to Square Enix for sponsoring my review. If you've been following my channel for some time, or if you're new, I've been covering this game in depth since the day it was announced, and I'm so excited to have played the game and be able to give you a review of everything you can come to expect, whether you're a first timer or whether you're a series veteran like myself. We're going to be covering the narratives and themes, such as the setting and characters and why it's loved so much. And then we'll touch on the gameplay and the systems within the game so you can know what to expect. Most importantly, I want to go over why the game matters so much today. We'll then cover some of the things the game does really well, and also some things I wish would have gotten a little bit more attention in this enhanced edition of a classic. One of the best parts of the game is the setting. It takes place in Ivalice. It just got out of a 50-year-long war. Poverty ravages the land as the elites live high in their castles, and the everyday commoner, as well as the soldiers returning home from war, have to get by with scraps.
Dreams do not fill a man's stomach or make soft the packed earth on which he beds.
You see naught beyond the end of your nose. The crown strays, Gustav. It must be led back onto the path.
There's also a political issue of succession and who's going to be the heir of the current sickly king. This creates a perfect opportunity for those in power to vie for more power at the cost of the everyday person. Ivalice comes with a big spoonful helping of classism. Nobles versus commoners and wars for power, wealth inequality, systematic oppression, and institutions that exploit things like faith and fear. We can absolutely relate to those things in modern times. And that's what makes the Final Fantasy Tactics story so interesting, is the story of Ramza and Delita. Ramza Beov is the main character of the game, comes from the great Beov house. Huge notoriety and status, as well as siblings that are very high up in the rankings.
They sing your praise from on high. You do honor to our name, my brother, and to me.
Now you've truly the right to call yourself a Beov.
Ramza being born into a house of high standing, where Delita, his best friend, born as a commoner, but living alongside the high standing and having to deal with that in-between life of never being accepted.
Power. But I cannot. 'Tis my meager lot in this life.
Circumstances and surroundings have shaped the different responses to Delita and Ramza and how to handle the situation. That storyline being injected into the world of Ivalice with all the political machinations and sinister plot lines, you're going to be in for a treat. And this is honestly why people love this game, is the relatable storylines and these two characters and the dichotomy and different paths they take. It really makes you ask yourself questions. What would you do in those situations? I could honestly go on forever about the plot and why this game is so special, narratively wise, but I don't want to spoil anything else. I want you to enjoy this game fully when you get your hands on it. I want to go in next to some of the gameplay and the systems, because not only is this game a masterpiece with its writing and its character development, but it's also set the standard for tactical combat in its gameplay. So the way the combat works, as you can see here, it's an isometric grid-based battle. The turn order is based on your speed and charge time, and the positioning and planning of your characters is critical. You can see on the left side of the screen, that's the turn order, and your character information is in the bottom. This game really shines with the core of how the mechanics are set up. So we'll explore what is the job system. The game works off of a job system, like some of the classic Final Fantasy adventures, or if you play the more modern Final Fantasy XIV, jobs like Knight, Dragoon, Monk, Black Mage, White Mage, a ton are in here. There's about 20 to unlock, not including special jobs. So as you can see, the game gives you a description here of the job you're looking to pick. It tells you the stat multipliers when you pick it, your job growth, what kind of stats you want to emphasize when you're being that job. It seems like a lot of things happening at once, but the game does a great job of explaining it and breaking it down and making it very easy. You gain job points as you battle, along with experience points. The experience points raise your character level, the job points raise your job level. You increase job levels by earning those job points. You spend the job points on skills that you can equip, and those job levels get you unlocks for other jobs. So you can really get deep with builds here. I'm talking if you had a good time with something like Baldur's Gate 3, for example, you can get extremely deep with that. And honestly, this is one of the most RPG-heavy Final Fantasy experiences out there. You can come up with so many different types of builds, which I'll have different videos on in the future going over information like that. But the cool thing is you can interact with that system as much as you want. The game does get difficult later on in the game, but honestly, if you can stick to some of the basic jobs and do a great job leveling them up and maxing them out, you'll still perform just fine. And you can also adjust the difficulty of this game as well, so don't worry if things seem too difficult. You also recruit story characters as you play the game, and some of them are really powerful and will carry you, especially later on in the game. There's even a monster catching mechanic to the game where you can build a roster of monsters. They'll have eggs as you travel around the map. The monster mechanics can actually get pretty in-depth. There's about 3 different levels of monsters. You can poach them, which is if you kill them with a certain ability, you get a chance to get a super rare item that you can only get that way in the game. And having this monster catching mechanic for some of the really rare monsters that you encounter is an easy way to make sure that you fight them often. There's so many ways to make the job grind easier. You can get hundreds of JP points in a matter of minutes. And if you dedicate maybe 30 minutes to an hour, you can master some of the jobs pretty easily. I'll even make some videos later giving some how-tos on easy ways to do this. Honestly, as long as you have an idea of what you want to do for a character, melee, magic, range, things like that, you can just stick to that and keep doing it throughout the game and you'll be fine. You take those abilities that you learn with the job points and you can equip different movesets. For an example, you can have a black mage, but if you spend some time as a white mage, you can equip the white mage abilities alongside your black mage abilities. Lots of different combinations that you can imagine for this, right? And then you have a good time here in the battles. This right here is a random battle. You can come across those in the map by just walking around. You have the ability to engage with the encounter or flee. And then if you actually get in the battle and things are too rough, you can just hit the start button, load back a few spots, or resort back to the map if this battle's too much for you and you don't want to have to do it. So lots of accessibility options there to make it really easy. There's also a fast forward button involved too to make any sort of grinding or optional battles that much quicker. During story battles, there's conversations that'll happen between main characters that really expand upon the depth. A lot of this was added into the enhanced edition of the game and did not exist in the original. I'm not going to spoil too much by showing any of these additional conversations because honestly, it's been some of my favorite experiences of playing the Ivalice Chronicles compared to the original, is having this expanded story, especially for a lot of the villains and side characters. But what I will say is I highly recommend that you bring in characters like Agreus and Mustadio and other unnamed additional characters that you'll get on your team in story battles to hear this additional content. One downside of this does mean that the generic characters that you spent a lot of time with in chapters 1 and 2, leveling up, you aren't going to bring as many of them into the story battles, as again, it is highly recommended to bring in these special side characters and story characters. The game does have some infamously difficult moments, but they have been much lessened by the ability that you can leave the battles and go grind for more experience if you need. In the future, I'll have some videos up to give you some builds to help you on some of these, especially one-on-one Ramza fights. But otherwise, they do give more options than before, but the difficulty definitely still is there. But again, you can make your way through this. Don't be scared to give the game a try because of any of the difficulty. They give you tons of options. The tone of this game really is unlike any other Final Fantasy I can think of, other than possibly Final Fantasy 16, I'd say is the closest. It much more resembles something like a Game of Thrones than it does a happy fantasy adventure. But it works for the type of world that it's built in. The writing is so good. You have to give it a chance. You will be enthralled by it. Visually, I think the game looks beautiful. It almost looks like it has this canvas background, like filter that's been applied to the game. It makes it feel much more like a watercolor type experience. It's one of my favorite iterations of a pixel game on a modern HD television. Instead of like any sort of Vaseline smudge that you hear about when it comes to the pixels, it looks much more like a watercolor. The music is honestly some of the best also. The only reason I'm not playing it in the video is because I'm afraid there may be some sort of copyright issue with it, but it is some of my favorite Final Fantasy music and video game music in general, so you will absolutely love it. It's not remastered or re-recorded, but the original still holds up extremely well. You combine this amazing narrative with this deep and engaging gameplay, and you can see why after 30 years later, this game still matters today. There's people on socials and everywhere for years, forums, talking about Final Fantasy Tactics, hoping and wishing this game came true. The story beats of the classism and corruption of power, and the dichotomy between Ramza and Valida, resisting injustice or playing into the system. These are timeless questions. Do you fight corruption at a personal cost, or do you compromise to win? These are all questions, again, that you'll be asking yourself through, and this is why the game matters today. Why, after 30 years, the game's being revisited in an enhanced version. Now, some of the strengths and weaknesses, the strengths I already went over a lot in this video. The deep and endless rewarding tactical gameplay. It's honestly one of the best job systems in RPG history. The most RPG heavy Final Fantasy game out there, unless you want to maybe talk about 14 and the pure RPG aspects. It's got a mature and politically charged narrative that I think a lot of folks will enjoy in this day and age. The replay value and experimentation is through the roof. It's going to play amazing on whether you're playing it on a TV, a PC, and it's going to shine in handheld. I played a ton of this on my PlayStation Portal and it just felt perfect there. Every scene and NPC has been voice acted in the enhanced edition as well, and it just adds a new layer of life to this game that really pushes it over the top. It's brimming with life and personality. There's so many scenes I want to share, so many crazy moments, but I don't want to spoil them. But I'll give a brief one here that I feel like is vague enough to not spoil anything, but you can get an idea of how the voice acting helps these scenes.
Your wounds. What did this to you?
A beast. Oh God, my limbs grow cold.
Be strong, sir.
Flee, my lady. Flee. There is only death here.
Again, the voice acting adds so much, especially when you talk about all of the added dialogue to the game in all of the battles. Battle will stop and characters will go back and forth between each other, especially if you've brought certain characters into the battle. And just having that voice acted, you get to feel and get more backstory in these characters. It all just is done so well. Some of the things I wish were a little bit different, maybe some weaknesses of it, are some of those difficulty spikes, especially when a lot of them occur in either a 1v1 battle or you're in a battle where you have an objective, a character you have to save. And sometimes if your speed isn't correct, the enemy can start the battle and take the objective out before you even had a chance to make a move. Then you have to go back into your formation, make sure you have enough speed, things like that. I feel like those kind of instances shouldn't be in the game, especially the ones where you can lose the battle before you even take a turn. But again, the plethora of options they've given you in the Ivalice Chronicles enhancement really helps solve some of those problems, even though they still some exist. Another thing is a lot of the story characters that you get end up being so strong that they replace a lot of the generic characters. And it does suck to spend 2 to 3 chapters leveling these characters up, kind of getting a bond with them, and then them having basically kicked to the curb for these story characters, especially now when you have these added dialogue moments where you really need to make sure you're bringing them in there to hear all of this extra backstory and back and forth between the villains and your characters. There is a lot of talk about the second version of the Final Fantasy Tactics, which is the War of the Lions that came out, and some of the content from that game not be included in this one. I'm not really including that as part of my review because this is an enhanced version of the first game, the Final Fantasy Tactics PS1 game. So I'm not going to really be talking about the War of the Lions stuff. I do wish that for this game, the enhanced version, they did add a little bit here and there more when it came to like maybe a new character. Something like Clive from Final Fantasy 16 would be amazing, being that this is the same studio that made Final Fantasy 16. I feel like he would fit perfectly in this world. And I would like to have seen a little bit of changes to things like, let's say, the samurai class, the way that their katana or weapon works. Would have been nice if they would have came equipped with double hand as opposed to having to learn that and equip it. So little things like that. Also, they increased teleport, the JP cost, the time mage move, to 3,000 JP, which is pretty insane. It takes a long time to get to 3,000. You can master some classes with 3,000 JP, so for one ability to learn that, I guess they thought it trivialized some of the game, which honestly it did, but I think 3,000 is a little bit of an overcorrection. I do wonder if that'll be changed. Ultimately, Final Fantasy Tactics stands out not just as a tactical RPG, but as a timeless story of class, corruption, and choice. The added State of the Realm viewer adds another layer of immersion and helps you keep up to date with the story in ways that weren't possible before by visually seeing the events play out in front of you. The choices of Ramza and Delita embody struggles that we still see today in modern times. The mechanics make it endlessly replayable, and the story makes it unforgettable. In a world where the gap between powerful and powerless still defines our lives, Final Fantasy Tactics matters now more than ever. Thank you so much for watching. If you were entertained, like this video, share it with a friend, get the Final Fantasy Tactics word out, subscribe to my channel, keep your eyes peeled for some beginner tips and advanced tips, as well as character recruitment videos. And as always, I'll catch you on the next one.